Welcome to the International Franchise Association's Women's Franchise Committee podcast, Her Success, the Stories of Female Franchise Leaders. I'm Leanne Caruso with Entrepreneur Media, and today I'm talking with Dr. Kathleen Gosser, Assistant Professor of Franchise Management and Director of the Yum Center for Global Franchise Excellence at the University of Louisville. Welcome, Kathy.
Thank you for having me.
Your bio is such a mouthful. I'm gonna read a little bit of it, and then we're just gonna let you tell your story after that. So Kathy is the Yum Assistant Professor of Franchise Management and the Director of the Yum Center for Global Franchise Excellence in the College of Business at the University of Louisville. She retired from KFC, part of Yum Brands, in August of 2019 after a 35-year career and immediately started a role teaching at the University of Louisville, the College of Business. Sorry, I probably should have said Louisville, right?
You're good. Any way you like to say it.
She co-created and now leads the Franchise Management Certificates, which is available at the graduate level, non-credit executive education, and now an undergraduate Bachelor of Business Administration degree. Kathy also teaches undergraduate courses in the management department. So, all right, I'm going to let you tell us the rest. You have quite a history in franchising at Yum Brands, and now you're doing the complete opposite thing, but truly helping franchising grow. And I'm just so excited to talk to you. So can you just tell us your story and your background and where you got from where you were to today?
Yes, if I can remember it all. Once I did that 35 years, I'm like, oh my gosh, just put the hashtag old under my name. That's all right, because every decade is better. And I appreciate that academic title. You know, in academia, we love to have long titles, and that is for sure. But I actually started in franchising about a year out of college. I'd gotten a job I didn't really like, and so I was serving at night as a server at Chi-Chi's. It was a Mexican type restaurant. And I answered this ad in the paper, and here's what it said: travel the country, shop our stores, and tell us how we're doing in quality service and cleanliness. Well, I immediately thought I was going to go shopping. I mean, I was a young woman. I thought, oh, I'm going to go from mall to mall all around the country. Well, then Kentucky Fried Chicken called me. And I was like, what? And it was back then, and I love to tell this to my students, you would apply to an ad in the paper, and it was a blind box office, meaning it was just a box office number because they didn't want you to call them. Times at that point, unemployment rates were really high, and it was difficult to get a job. And so I sent it off and didn't think about it. It was the only resume I sent off. And my mom kept saying, honey, you're the only one in the family with a college degree. You've got to get a job. And so you've got to get a real job, because I had a job, but she's like, you've got to get a real job. Well, when Kentucky Fried Chicken called and they said, we have your resume and it's for a mystery shopper traveling the country, would you be interested? And so I interviewed, and I found out later they had 4,000 resumes. So think about, in today's world, if you could get 4,000 resumes for a job, and it was entry level. I think they paid $14,500 at the time, or some obscure number, but it was a long time ago. So that money was worth more. I get it. But anyway, so I got the job, and I would be gone 10 days, home 4. And I had a journalism degree from Indiana University. So I felt like I was a little reporter. And I would go to 17 KFCs a day, and they would tell me what to order, and I would write about my experience. And so the big thing I love to tell students is I would go to 17 KFCs a day without a cell phone and without GPS. And it's the equivalent of our grandparents saying, I walked 2 miles in the snow barefoot, right?
Right.
And so
math, like you had an actual map. This is
I had a map, yes,
math quest, right?
And the KFCs were marked. And so I would laugh because it was really like I would go from KFC to a gas station to get directions to the next KFC. So, but it really taught me how to read a map. I can tell you that. And it was the most wonderful job. I mean, it was really fantastic. So they said, this is not a career. You will be here for 1.5 to 2 years. They were very upfront about that, but I was young and that sounded like a career. And then I did have a career there. So it ended up, I just started moving up, did a lot of different things. I led the mystery shopper program. I led it on the franchise, the company side, and then the entire side. And then I also led customer satisfaction, back of house evaluation, food safety, the 800 hotline number. And then I just kept moving up, and I was told, well, if you want to go to the next level at Yum, you have to run restaurants. So for a year, I ran 10 restaurants here in Louisville.
Oh,
as
wow.
a director of operations. And I always say that's the best of times and worst of times.
Okay.
And there I found out that running restaurants is probably 40% HR issues and 60% running restaurants. So it was, the stories from that year. And then I went on to Yum, as I was at the Yum role for about 6 years, an international role where I worked with all the brands. And then I came back to KFC. And once I finished my PhD, they realized I was serious about training. And I led training and organizational development the last 7 years, as well as led the KFC Foundation, which is a philanthropic arm of KFC, all funded by the restaurants. It's a wonderful organization. Along the way, I got that PhD and taught at night, and always knew I wanted to be a professor when I grew up or retired, and here I am. So had the opportunity at the University of Louisville, and it has been a ride. Let's just say that, a great ride.
I bet. I bet. So tell me about what University of Louisville is doing now, the College of Business, and what Yum is doing, how this all kind of started, because you went straight into being a professor, but how did the rest of it grow from there?
Yes, timing is a lot of timing is something that people talk about a lot as being a part of their success. And I do think there's a lot to timing. And so we had a dean that came in 5 years ago. He's recently left, Dr. Todd Meradian, who's a visionary. And when he came, I was on the board of advisors representing Yum at the College of Business. And the person that was teaching franchising had retired. They had one class in the MBA program. So my colleague and I, Dr. Denise Cumberland, who is our senior researcher now at the Yum Center, and she and I co-created all this curriculum. She said, hey, they've contacted me about teaching, but I said, I'll do it if you'll do it with me. So we taught this like a year and a half in person. Well, then they said, the dean called us in and said, I have a vision for a stackable credential, a stackable certificate within the MBA. What a vision. I mean, he chose a couple of others like distilled spirits to the horse racing industry. I mean, just really a visionary. So Denise and I embarked on a 2-year journey to create this curriculum. We talked with the IFA leaders. We talked with so many leaders in the industry, developed our curriculum all online, asynchronous, which is a fancy word that means you can get on at your own pace. And so we developed this certificate. And we always said, the audience may not be right because you have to have a college degree. But Todd said, I'll still move this way and then we'll see what happens. So about a year before I retired, he asked me for to meet for a drink, which I don't really drink, but anyway, that's fine. So we met and he said, hey, word on the street is you're going to retire in a year, because I gave like a 3-year notice. He said, word on the street, you're going to retire in a year. We'd like you to come work with us. Let's talk about what that looks like. So I was thrilled. Again, timing. So I retired. This is kind of embarrassing. I retired on August 2nd of 2019, and I started on August 1st of 2019 at the university. So
you don't even give yourself a break.
I love it too much. So once I got to the university, it was great, and we realized that let's pivot this content to a non-credit version, working with the IFA. So they also provided the CFE credits. And then now we're working on undergraduate. We have 3 courses that I'm probably so proud of because they're full. And the students, what they're learning about franchising, they had no idea what the opportunity was. So we pivoted to undergraduate courses, and hopefully soon we'll have a certificate there. We're still working on the process. But what happened was, and this is why I say timing. So 2020, obviously the pandemic hit. And then of course, all the incidents, the incidents with all around the country, all the racial unrest and all the terrible things that happened. And Yum Brands said, we want to do something. So they pledged a large pledge of $100 million to give all around the world to really help combat racial inequity and what we could do, gender inequalities, what they could do to make a difference. So they said, we want to spend, I think they started out with 50, and they actually asked all organizations to apply, whatever you think you can do. So we have some connections here at the University of Louisville. Our chair of the board of trustees is actually, she and I worked together, and she was a vice president at Yum. And she called me and said, I think this is interesting, and I think we ought to consider how we could partner with Yum. So we did. I'll fast forward. It took about 9 months. And actually my first conversation about franchising was much smaller than a center. And Yum said, think bigger. come back with a bigger offer. What else do you think we can do? So we put together this idea for a center, and the center would be focused on franchise education and research, but really on those who are historically underrepresented. It will serve all, but we really want to focus on those who are historically underrepresented. And so we named the Center for Global Franchise Excellence back in May of 2021. And then we decided we needed a board of advisors. And so we have a top-notch board of advisors. I've moved slowly on that. You are one, Leanne. How lucky am I? But my biggest goal before I retire again is to award 100 scholarships. And this year we have 20 available. So that's pretty cool.
Wow. So
Yes.
how do people apply to get a scholarship?
Good question. You can go to our website. Really, if you just Google Yum Center for Global Franchise Excellence Scholarships, it will pop up. So these are open at all 3 levels, but the boot camp level is really open to all franchise folks who just want extra content. And what's interesting about our content is it focuses on the franchise model. So it's not something a franchisor teaches, but it's more about what is the model, what are the legalities behind it? And we teach 2 classes on HR, which franchisors, due to the joint employer laws, shy away from. So we go deep on those, and also about that relationship with the franchisee franchisor. So the whole purpose is to really make people more knowledgeable of how to work within the franchise model. Okay, that was a lot.
Take a breath. So this is really for, like, the boot camp is really good for prospective candidates who want to become a franchisee, or maybe somebody who just signed an agreement and they want to become, or they're going to be a franchisee and they, maybe changing careers, or, looking to be a business owner, and they could just learn more about the franchise model as a whole.
I'm
Right.
glad you asked that, because you're right, all of the above. So anyone that wants to become a franchisee, work for a large franchisee, because a great trend in our industry is that large franchisees are giving equity as part of their compensation packages when people come on board. So understanding what that means. So if you want to be a franchisee, work for a franchisee. I also submit working for a franchisor, knowing what are our obligations as a franchisor to our franchisees? How do we make the relationship work? How can we be a better partner? And then the last group are suppliers. Again, how can you be a better partner to people in the franchising industry? So having this knowledge, anyone that works within franchising can definitely gain value from it.
That's great. Well, I love what you're doing at the University of Louisville. And so one of my questions for you is back at Yum. So you started many years ago. I forgot the number, but doesn't matter.
Yes.
What would you say? Were there any challenges? I mean, you moved quite a bit up and took your career on its own trajectory, which is amazing. But did you run into any challenges as a female or as a woman in business that
I did.
Yeah.
I did. And what I'm really glad about is that some of the things that occurred wouldn't occur today.
Right.
So we have really moved so much. I know it feels that women are still behind, but when I look at where it was when I first started at KFC to where it is now, it's totally different. I remember there was a franchisee who was the head of the Franchise Advisory Council, and I had done a presentation. I was young, and it was nerve-wracking. Okay. It was like, you can imagine, I'm young, and all these, and they were all men, were around the table, and they were pretty difficult. And one of them actually said to me, you look real pretty up there, honey, but are you about finished? And so, yeah, that's your reaction now. That wouldn't happen today.
Right.
But we had our senior leaders at the table, and they didn't flinch. So, because that was the norm.
Yeah.
And I said, yes, I am. And just left. And it was one of those things. And what I love is that would not happen today. There is no way that would happen. So just a couple of odd things. I will say I had someone who worked for a franchise was pretty inappropriate with me when we were visiting restaurants one day. It's been many, many years ago, just absolutely inappropriate. And I told my boss that night, and he said, you're getting on a plane and you're coming home, and I'm going to talk to them. You're done there. And so that kind of support really meant a lot to me and made me realize you got to speak up. You have to say these things are happening, and then they will. Once I got older, my whole life changed. Nobody bothers you anymore after you've been around for a long time. But when you're new at a company and you're just uncomfortable, so that was kind of a strange thing. There were a number of times I had I had to speak up for myself and point out some inequities. And luckily, the company always stood behind me and made a difference. But my career, I was a director 25 of those 35 years. And people often wonder, why didn't you move forward? Why didn't you move into a VP role? Why didn't you do those kind of things? I don't know. What I do know is that my career grew. You always hear the career lattice, right?
Right.
Just read a great article about a career portfolio in those flatter organizations. That's what I had. And it was wonderful because I was able to learn so many different things and grow my job broadly versus upwardly. And, Yum Brands is very generous. So it was never a compensation issue, but it just worked out that way. And I'm so grateful because what I learned through all those years and through all those different positions really set me up for where I'm at today. So I think thinking that your career can only grow straight up, even though mine did the first 10 years, I mean, we're talking rocket ship up.
Right.
But I think being comfortable with where your role is and how can you grow it where you are was a really big learning for me. And having the support of mentors and leaders that I worked for really made a difference.
Right. So your career kind of had depth to it, even though
Yes.
the title stayed the same, and the company changed so much over the course of time too.
Oh,
It's so cool that you were a part of that growth.
so much. I remember when we spun off to PepsiCo, and none of us really knew what that meant. I was a director at the time. It was back in 1997, and David Novak was the new leader. And they're like, "This is going to be a great thing, and you're going to get these stock options." And we thought, "So what?" Because we didn't really understand the whole concept of stock options, and it ended up being an amazing thing, I might add. And so it was a pivotal moment, and they're getting ready to celebrate their 25-year anniversary this October, and it's just a really incredible time when I think back to those early days, and we had no idea what it meant to what it means today.
Right. Well, I think that you have, because of the depth of your experience, even though it was with one company, I mean, what a career, but what would you say your greatest accomplishment would be? And you probably have a couple since you just started a whole new career. But what would you say as your greatest accomplishment to date?
Oh, that word, the accomplishment, because it makes it sound so kind of personal. But I think earning the PhD while I was still working as a director and traveling all over was quite an accomplishment. And what I really loved is that KFC and Yum appreciated that, to the point that, like, David Novak had me present my findings to him, and my research was on the predictors of intent to stay in the fast food industry. And what was great about that is we actually used that to develop programs at Yum. So I'm really proud of that we were able to use that research and make a difference. But when I think about some of my proudest moments, it is, and the biggest accomplishments, it is when my team would excel. So I had this team at the end, and that was the hardest part to leave. And we call each other hashtag Team Awesome. And we do the weird hashtag like they do on Saturday Night Live, Yeah. And so they were the most awesome group of individuals you've ever seen, won tons of awards. We were able to tie our training impact to business results. I mean, they were just amazing. So every time they would be promoted, every time they'd win an award, that was big. And the thing that I'm probably most proud of when I left KFC is the learning component. So I worked for a great guy by the name of John Kernick for the last 7 years, and he has since retired. He was the chief people officer. And at my retirement party, this was just amazing. So he actually had, KFC actually came up with an award called the Kathy Gosser Learning Legacy Award. And every year they give away $20,000 to people that don't want to go to a college, like for tuition, but maybe they want to get a certificate. And that's a pretty incredible thing if you think about it. I mean, that's like, gosh, just amazing. So I have to say, I'm not a big crier. Okay, I might have cried at that.
Yeah. I'd say you left quite the legacy.
It was a great place. It was a great.
And now you're just creating a whole new one. So, so you said that you led a team. How did you, with your growth over the years and your growth probably professionally and personally, how did you inspire, empower your team to do great, to be Team Awesome?
I think, and you already got their name. Way to go, Leanne. I think what you said about empowering is the key. So I think a leader's this is just my 2 cents. I think a leader's role is to, first of all, you have to set the strategic vision. You have to get people excited about where you want to go. So like I would say, we are going to write this new shift supervisor training program. So great. We're going to be a Brandon Hall Gold. And Brandon Hall is it's like an awarding agency in training. This is going to be gold. So you have to set a vision. Then you have to remove barriers. And then you have to let your team do the work, and you have to cheer them on. Course correct when you do, but you don't do the work. And so I think having the vision, cheering them on, removing barriers, any barriers they have, you come to me, I'll knock them out so that you can do the work you need to do. And I had, I had some team members, they'd always come to me. They always want a new piece of software. They would, they tag team me. And so two of my brightest and best would tag team me during our one-on-ones. And after a while, I knew what they were doing, but they always won, because what they always wanted made us better. And so always pushing the needle, always doing new things, setting high goals. I think that's how you motivate people, but especially creative types, you got to get out of the way. Mm-hmm. And so I can't do their work for them. Right. And then of course I have to give them the credit. That's important. They did the work, not me. They get the credit. Absolutely. And if there's a problem, I take the blame. Right. Because leader, that's what I have to do. So I think those are really the tickets. And have fun. We always had fun. We did some of the goofiest things. And I think the more you can inject humor and just a sense of, it's only chicken. I mean, it's not, we're not saving lives here. It really did make a difference.
That's great. There was actually a little discussion on LinkedIn the other day about if you say my team or our team, and you say our team always, but you say my team when you take the blame.
Oh, I love that.
Like you take responsibility. It's yours, but otherwise, if you're leading a team, it's our team. Yeah.
I love that so much. I mean, because I do think that's true. And the accomplishments they had, I cannot even tell you how talented this group was. Just amazing. And they still are. They're just still doing great things.
Right. I love that you're still so proud of them and proud to be part of what you helped grow. That's amazing. So we're coming close on time. I can't believe it always goes by so fast, yes. Especially chatting with you. But so I'm going to ask one of the questions that I always ask people. But if you could give one piece of advice to a young woman entering the workforce, what would that be?
So this one comes back to the word confidence. And when I think about how I was when I started to where I'm at today, it really comes down to that confidence word. So I really didn't have a lot when I first started. And I saw some research that was just fascinating. And it showed the difference between confidence levels with men and women. And it went through the decades. So 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. And in the 20s, men far outrank women in confidence. And I've seen this over and over, and it was me. And then as you age, the gap closes. And then when you get in your 60s, I think women are a little bit farther ahead. I totally agree with that. So it's like, as you think about what's the worst that can happen, I know what I'm doing here. Let me push forward. And I wish that I had more confidence back then to know it's going to be okay. And I just need to show up and say what I think. And the times that I would do that, I was always successful. But not doing that, you'll miss an opportunity if you don't push. So telling myself to speak up more, have more confidence. It's hard to believe I'd say that now, but that's what I wish that I had worked more on back then.
Yeah. Well, it must have been really hard for you to even, in those early days, standing up for yourself in terms of, some of the inequities that you saw. So you probably just had to keep building it and keep building it. And that's always great advice.
But it's also finding mentors. So I had some of the greatest mentors. Jim McKelvey was the vice president of franchising, mentored me for so many years. One of his best pieces of advice was, do the job that you have right now the best you can. Don't look at the next job. You be the best you can in this job. And then I had a mentor, Alwyn Lewis, who went on to be, the president of Kmart and the president of Sears and the president of Potbelly's, and just amazing. He sits on all kinds of boards. And he used to always say to me, and he was intimidating, when I'd leave his office, he'd always say, and this didn't bother me because it was a different time. And he'd go, "Hey, kid." And I'd turn around and he'd say, "Don't let anyone steal your dreams." Oh. And I love that. And I think about that all the time. Yeah. And so it was funny when I got my Ph.D., he was not at Yum anymore. And I sent him an email and I said, a wise mentor once told me, don't let anyone steal your dreams. I said, today mine came true. And then I signed, Kathleen Gosser, Ph.D. It was so cool. And he's been amazing. And then I've had female mentors now at the university who have helped me so much. And I think females helping females is just critical. And so Dr. Sharon Carrick has been great. Dr. Gail Rhodes has been great. And so I have these people who've really helped me. And Jana Bailey in the terms of the franchising world and navigating, because I was at Yum for all those years. I cannot tell you how much that means to me to have that support. And now the advice that you give me, the advice that my board of advisors provides. And that's what I love about franchising. We're all willing to help each other.
That's right. Jana is one of my mentors too. I've had the honor to work with her, and she's just a fun person.
Oh, and smart. Whew.
Yes, so smart. Okay, well, that's it for today. Thank you so much for taking the time and for telling your story. I know you're always asking the questions, so I definitely appreciate flipping the microphone here. And I'm excited to see what the Center of Excellence, the Yum Global Center of Franchise Excellence continues to do. And you're just such an inspiration, and thank you for everything.
Thank you, Leanne.